The station known as Vega Prime floated in the dark like a small metal moon. It had been built by 6 different species over 200 years, and it showed. The corridors did not match, the gravity shifted between sections, and the air tasted different depending on where you were standing. Humans who visited for the first time usually spent the first hour just trying to figure out which way was up. Captain Laura Holt had been to Vega Prime 4 times. She no longer needed to figure out which way was up. She stood near the entrance to the main council chamber and watched the delegates file in. 47 civilizations had a seat on the Galactic Council. Some of them were old enough to remember when humans were still drawing on cave walls. Some of them had been watching Earth from orbit for centuries before humanity even knew they were being watched. Laura knew all of this. She also knew that none of it mattered very much inside a council chamber, where the only thing that counted was who was talking and what they were saying. Ambassador Cole Danner came up beside her. He was a wide-shouldered man from Ohio, and he had the kind of face that always looked like it was thinking about something other than what was happening in front of him. He was chewing gum. He had been chewing gum since they left the ship. "You ready for this?" he said. "Not really," Laura said. "You?" Cole shrugged. "I brought 3 packs of gum. I think I'm fine." They went inside. The chamber was large and round and designed so that no single seat was higher than any other. It was meant to make everyone feel equal. It mostly just made it hard to see across the room. Laura took her seat at the human delegation table and looked around at the other delegates. Most of them were talking quietly among themselves. Some of them were not looking at the human table at all, which she noticed. Delegate Voron of the Scythic Collective was already seated. He was tall and thin, with 4 arms and a face that did not move the way human faces did. He was the one who had called this session. Laura had read everything available about him before the trip. He was considered careful and smart, not the kind of delegate who called emergency sessions without a reason. The session came to order. The council's lead speaker, a soft-voiced alien named Ethis, began the presentation. The proposal on the table was simple, at least in the way it was worded. The Galactic Council, citing concern for the long-term stability of the outer territories, was recommending that humanity be formally classified as a protected species under galactic law. What that meant, in plain terms, was this: humans would be restricted from certain travel lanes. Humans would not be permitted to engage in direct military conflict without council approval. And humanity would be assigned a guardian species, one of the older civilizations, who would officially oversee human activity in space. Laura listened to all of it without moving. Cole chewed his gum. When Ethis finished, there was a pause for delegation responses. Cole leaned forward slightly and raised one hand. "One question," he said. Ethis nodded. "Protected from what, exactly?" The chamber was quiet. Ethis began a long answer about instability and unpredictability and the general danger of rapid expansion without proper guidance. Cole listened. He did not write anything down. When Ethis finished, Cole nodded slowly, as if the answer had been satisfying, and sat back. Laura watched Delegate Voron across the room. He had not moved during any of it. He had not looked at Ethis while Ethis was speaking. He had been watching the other delegates. Laura looked at the other delegates too. Most of them were nodding along. Some of them looked uncomfortable. She pulled out her small handheld screen and typed a message to Cole's device: "Look at table 7. The Lorani delegate, Cole glanced over without being obvious about it. The Lorani delegate was not nodding. He was sitting very still, with his hands flat on the table, looking at nothing. Cole typed back: "What about him?" Laura typed: "He looks relieved." Cole looked again. Then he typed: "Yeah. He does." Laura sat back and thought about that for a moment. The hearing was scheduled to continue the next morning. There was a lot more data to get through. A lot more proposals. A lot more careful wording about what humanity needed and why. But she was already thinking about something else. She was thinking about why a species that had almost been wiped out twice in the last century would look relieved at the news that humans were going to be restricted. And she was thinking about what that meant about who, exactly, had been keeping the Lorani alive. The hearing began again the next morning at the 6th standard hour, which on Vega Prime meant the lights in the chamber shifted from dim blue to a pale yellow. Laura had been awake for 2 hours already. She had spent most of that time reading that the Council's case was built on 200 years of data. They had records going back to humanity's first contact with deep space. They had charts and tables and a very long list of incidents that the Council had labeled, in their official documentation, as examples of human recklessness. It was, Laura thought, an impressive collection of paperwork. It was also, she thought, being presented in a very specific way. Ethos walked the chamber through the list slowly. The First Contact War of 2198, which humans had entered without Council permission. The border dispute of 2241, where a human cargo fleet had opened fire on vessels belonging to the Kreth Alliance. The expansion push of 2280, when human colonies had established themselves in 3 systems that the Council considered contested territory. With each item, Ethos presented the Council's official interpretation. Reckless. Aggressive. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Cole sat beside Laura and chewed his gum and did not say anything. Laura made notes that when Ethos finished the list, there was a pause. The floor was open for delegation responses before the Council continued. Cole raised his hand. Ethos nodded at him. I'd like to request something, Cole said. I'd like to replay the data. Same timeline, same incidents. But this time, I'd like to add the casualty reports. Ethos paused. The casualty reports are not part of the official presentation. No, Cole agreed. But they're in the record. And I think they're relevant. There was a short discussion among the senior Council members. Then Ethos nodded and a Council aide pulled up the expanded data. The chamber watched. The First Contact War of 2198 looked different with the full numbers. Humans had entered the conflict without Council permission, yes. They had also been the only species to respond when the smaller civilizations on the outer edge of that sector were being pushed off their own planets. The casualty count on the other side of the conflict was steep. The casualty count among the species humanity had entered the war to help was much lower than it would have been. The border dispute of 2241 looked different too. The human cargo fleet had opened fire, yes. They had opened fire after 3 of their ships were destroyed without warning, and after a colony of 80,000 civilians had been threatened. The Kreth Alliance had backed down within a week. One by one, the incidents looked different with the full numbers. The chamber got quieter as the list went on. Laura was not watching the data screen. She was watching Delegate Voren. He had still not moved. He was watching the other Council members the same way he had the day before, carefully and without expression. She typed a message to Cole. He is not watching the data. He already knows what it says. Cole typed back without looking at her. So why bring this whole case in the first place? Laura looked at the chamber again. She looked at the smaller delegations, the species that did not have much power on the Council, the ones that usually sat quietly and voted the way the senior members expected them to. Some of them were leaning forward now. Some of them were whispering to each other. She watched one of them, a delegate from a species called the Paularen, glance over at the human table. It was a quick look, not unfriendly. Almost like checking to see if someone was still in the room. Laura typed one line to Cole. This isn't about protecting us. It is about containing us. Cole read it. He stopped chewing for just a second. Then he started chewing again and typed back, yeah. I was starting to think the same thing. The data finished. The chamber was very quiet. Ethos cleared his throat and moved on to the next part of the Council's presentation, which was the formal proposal for assigning humanity a guardian species. Laura wrote one more note to herself and underlined it twice. The note said, find out who has been asking for this, and find out why now. The afternoon session was supposed to be about the formal structure of the protection mandate. There were documents to review. There were timelines to discuss. There were 12 different Council members who had prepared statements. None of that happened. When the floor opened for delegation responses, Laura Holt stood up. Cole looked at her. She had not told him she was going to do this. He raised an eyebrow. She gave him a small nod that meant she knew what she was doing, or at least that she had thought about it enough. He sat back and unwrapped another piece of gum. Ethos recognized the human delegation. Laura walked to the center of the chamber, which was the traditional spot for a formal address. The room watched her. She was not tall and she was not loud, and she did not look like someone who was about to say something that would change the direction of the session. She stood in the center of the room for one moment of silence. Then she asked her question, from whom? Ethos blinked. I'm sorry, the proposal, Laura said. It says humanity needs protection. I'm asking from whom? Not from general instability. Not from abstract danger. I want a name. A species. A specific force or threat. Give me the thing you are protecting us from. The chamber was quiet. Ethos began a careful answer. He spoke about the complexity of the outer territories. He spoke about the history of conflict in that region of space. He spoke about the unpredictable nature of expansion and the importance of oversight. Laura waited until he was done. That wasn't an answer, she said. That was a description of general conditions. I asked for a specific threat. More silence. Laura looked around the chamber. Then she started talking. She talked about the Keth incursion of 2301. 3 human destroyers and a supply freighter had intercepted a Keth fleet that was moving toward 3 smaller inhabited systems. The Keth fleet had not been stopped by any council action. It had been stopped because the human ships were already in the area on a routine patrol, and because the captain of the lead destroyer had made a decision without waiting for permission. She talked about the siege of Pal-Loren Station. A single human marine unit, 17 people who had been on scheduled shore leave, had held a critical junction point for 9 days until a proper response could be organized. They had not been ordered to do it. They had just been there. She talked about the Lorani. She did not look at the Lorani delegate while she did it. She talked about the extinction event that had been attempted against them 12 years ago, and about a human cargo pilot named Don Carter who had been carrying medical supplies and had seen what was happening and had made a decision with a fully loaded freighter and a sublight engine and no weapons at all. Don Carter had survived. Most people were surprised by that. I can keep going, Laura said. I have a long list. But here is what I want the council to notice. In none of these situations did humanity act because the council ordered it. In some of these situations, humanity acted against specific council recommendations to stay out. And in all of these situations, the outcome for the species involved was better because a human was present than it would have been if no human was there. She let that sit for a moment. Then she asked the question again, so I will ask one more time. From whom are you protecting us? Because from where I am standing, the question the council should be asking is not who is going to protect humanity. The question is who has been protecting everyone else. The chamber did not make a sound. Delegate Voron of the Sci-Fi Collective looked at his hands. After a long pause, he said quietly that he was moving to call a recess. Nobody argued. Laura walked back to her seat. Cole was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. Well, he said. Yeah, she said. You want some gum? Yes, she said. I really do. The recess lasted 3 hours. Cole Danner spent most of that time in a small side corridor near the delegate meeting rooms, talking quietly with people who were not supposed to be talking to him. He was good at this. He had a way of standing that looked casual, like he was just leaning against a wall thinking about nothing, and people would come and stand near him and somehow a conversation would happen and he would learn things. The first delegate who found him was from a mid-sized species called the HFY. They had about 40 colony worlds and a decent fleet, and they had been on the council for about 3 centuries. The HFY delegate was a short creature with large eyes, and it stood close to Cole and spoke quietly. It told him, in careful language with several layers of meaning that Cole had to parse as he listened, that the protection order had not come from the full council. It had come from 4 of the senior council members, pushed through the agenda in a way that had not given the smaller delegations much time to review it. Cole nodded. And what do the smaller delegations think of it? He asked. The HFY delegate said nothing directly. But before it walked away, it said that it had always found humans to be very easy to talk to. Cole understood what that meant. The second delegate was from a species he did not recognize, small and quick-moving, representing one of the newer members of the council. It was more direct. It told Cole plainly that several delegations had been uncomfortable with the proposal but had not felt they could say so openly in the chamber. Cole asked why. The delegate said that 3 of the 4 senior members pushing the protection order were also the species that controlled access to certain important trade routes. Saying the wrong thing in the chamber had costs. The third delegate was the one that surprised him. It was from the Sci-Fi Collective, but it was not Voron. It was a junior aide, young by Sci-Fi standards, and it found Cole near the end of the recess and spoke quickly like it did not have much time. It told him that Delegate Voron had not wanted to bring this proposal. He had been asked to sponsor it by the 4 senior members because his reputation for careful judgment would make it harder to challenge. Voran had agreed because he thought the proposal would fail quickly and quietly and that would be the end of it. He did not expect your captain to stand up like that, the aide said. Nobody did, Cole said. The aide nodded and left. Cole found Laura at the observation deck on the station's upper level. It was a long curved window that looked out at a wide stretch of stars and the slow drift of other ships moving in and out of the station. She was standing with her hands in her pockets, holding a small cup of coffee that had probably gone cold. He told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. So it was never about protecting us, she said. No, Cole said. It was about the fact that smaller species have been looking toward Earth when things go wrong. Not to the Council. To us. And 4 old powers decided they didn't like what that looked like for their influence. Laura looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was the Iron Meridian, sitting in the docking ring, waiting. They're worried we're going to end up running the place without ever meaning to, she said. Cole thought about it for a long moment. He thought about every incident in Laura's list. Every time a human ship had shown up somewhere it did not have to be. Every time somebody had made a decision that cost them something personally and gained them nothing officially. Are they wrong? He asked. Laura did not answer. She drank what was left of her cold coffee and looked at the stars for another few seconds. Then she turned and walked back toward the chamber. Cole watched her go. Then he put a fresh piece of gum in his mouth and followed. He had a feeling the afternoon session was going to be interesting. The council reconvened at the 9th standard hour. The chamber felt different than it had that morning. Laura could not explain exactly why. The same delegates were in the same seats. The lights were the same pale yellow. Ethos was at the front of the room in the same position. But something had shifted, the way air shifts before a storm even before the clouds arrive. Delegate Voran was the first to speak. He moved slowly to the center of the chamber and stood there for a moment before he talked. When he did speak, he was brief. He said that after reviewing the full body of data presented by the human delegation, and after consultation during the recess, he was moving to table the protection order indefinitely, citing insufficient threat documentation. Ethos looked at the 4 senior council members. 3 of them were looking at their tables. One of them was looking at Voran with an expression that did not have a human equivalent, but that Laura read as frustrated. The vote was called. The motion passed. There was no celebration at the human table. Cole took out a piece of gum, looked at it for a second, then put it back in his pocket. Laura signed the session log, which was a formality, a human signature on a galactic record. The chamber began to empty. Delegates filed out in their small groups. Some of them glanced at the human table. Some of them did not. Laura waited until most of the room was clear. Then she walked to the council record desk near the side of the chamber, where a quiet aide was responsible for accepting formal submissions to the Galactic Archive. She placed a data card on the desk. I'd like to submit a document to the formal record, she said. The aide looked at the card. What is the subject? It's an archive, Laura said. A complete record of every instance in the last 200 years where a human crew, unit, pilot, or civilian intervened in a conflict or crisis they had no legal obligation to enter. Unedited. Sourced. Every incident, every outcome. The aide picked up the card. And the title, Laura said. For the record, the document was 14,000 pages long. It had taken the human delegation's research team 3 weeks to compile it. Laura had read all of it on the journey to Vega Prime. She had not slept much on that trip. The aide logged it. It entered the Galactic Archive that afternoon, quietly, the way most things that matter enter history. The council did not respond to it officially. There was no statement. No acknowledgement. The 4 senior members who had pushed the protection order did not mention it. But other things happened. In the weeks that followed, 6 smaller species sent formal requests to Earth's diplomatic office. Not for military alliance. Not for protection agreements. Just for a conversation. An opening of communication. A relationship. The HFY were first. Then a species called the Marate, who had been watching from a long way off and had decided they wanted to be closer. Then 4 others, each one a small civilization that had been navigating the galaxy quietly and had been paying attention. None of them were asking for anything grand. They just wanted to talk. Cole read the first request on the ship going home and showed it to Laura without saying anything that she read it. Then she handed the screen back. You know what this means, Cole said. I know, she said. We didn't conquer anything. We didn't demand anything. We just showed up when it mattered, and now 6 civilizations want to be our friends. 7, Laura said. The Pal Loren sent a request this morning. I saw it before you woke up. Cole was quiet for a moment. The council was right about one thing, he said. We are going to end up running this place. Laura looked out the small window at the stars moving past. The Iron Meridian was a fast ship. They would be home in 11 days. No, she said. We are not going to run anything. We are just going to keep showing up. She paused. It turns out that's enough.